Day 7 of the corruption trial of Senator Bob Menendez, New Jersey Democrat. And today, the judge, he was testy as he unloaded on attorneys from both sides.
Richard, the senator, left the courthouse focusing on his job in Washington, talking about a possible DACA deal between President Trump and his fellow Democrats.
Well, listen, I hope there can be a reasonable deal to actually do something to take care of these young people, these dreamers, who know no country other than the United States.
But in court, federal judge William Walls was not pleased with attorneys on each side, accusing the lawyers of trying to introduce evidence in a backdoor manner and accusing the attorneys of leading witnesses. Judge Walls had it, excusing the jury and telling all the lawyers involved, quote, "Some of you are so arrogant. I don't want to continually interrupt these proceedings. I'll slap you down verbally if I have to. If I have to be with you for the better part of 8 months, I'd resign." Prosecutors presented another private pilot of wealthy eye doctor Solomon Melgen. First-time flying a United States Senator, pilot Richard Revudo, testified about 2006 when on Melgen's Hawker jet, he flew Menendez, the senator's son, and Dr. Melgen to the Dominican Republic. The pilot said only Menendez and his son made the full return trip to Teterboro Airport. The last witness of the day, an FBI agent, Christina Cobb, talked about the $58,000 reimbursement check Menendez wrote to Melgen for some of the flights, but they were never listed on his mandatory disclosure forms. And the check was only written after a Washington Post reporter inquired. Defense attorneys have argued the gifts Melgen gave Menendez were tokens of their friendship, ranging from hundreds of thousands in campaign cash, an expensive Paris hotel room, and villa stays in the Dominican Republic, also flights on Melgen's jet. The strongest part of the government's case has not even been covered yet. But so far, prosecutors have focused on private jet flights for the senator, on the aircraft of co-defendant eye doctor Solomon Melgen, or flights for Menendez that Dr. Melgen paid for. One such flight was $8,000 to fly the senator from Florida to Washington when the doctor's jet was unavailable. Another flight prosecutors laid out in court, they say Dr. Melgen paid for a first-class $851 flight from Newark to Palm Beach in 2010 that came out of the American Express account of Melgen's son-in-law and chief of staff. The prosecution is trying to prove all of these flights were payback for actions the senator took on the doctor's behalf. Prosecutors have also used two alleged girlfriends of Dr. Melgen to claim that Senator Menendez helped them obtain visas to come into the country. Rosiel Polanco testified after her visa application was denied from the Dominican Republic for herself and her sister. She complained to Dr. Melgen. Prosecutors say the senator told his staff to call the ambassador ASAP to fix the situation. The visas were then granted. A second woman said Menendez played no role in her visa and was not happy with lead prosecutor Peter Koski. "No, I don't know why I'm here. He's just forcing me to be here," she said, referring to Koski. But again, the strongest part of the prosecution's case hasn't been covered yet. That's the allegation that Menendez used his office to aid Melgen in a couple of business ventures. One was the doctor allegedly overcharging Medicare. Dr. Melgen was convicted last summer of defrauding Medicare of $8.9 million. Menendez ran interference with federal officials to try and ward off that probe. He also intervened to aid Melgen in his efforts to corner a contract for port security in the Dominican Republic for a company the doctor owned. Menendez pushed upon federal officials to keep the U.S. from sending free screening equipment so the Dominicans could do their own port security.
All right, Dominic, and as you said, this is the first course of the meal right now. They're just trying to say that these two guys, hit a lot of hot spots around the globe here, all on Melgen's dime, and that the senator here was more than taken care of. Now they're going to try and show, well, if there was a quid, what's the quo? But to this point, we really haven't heard anything criminal against the senator. It's just an unflattering picture.
Well, yes, we have, if the jury buys it, and that is if you define an official act as helping with the visas for a man that gave you campaign donations, and more stuff, that's criminal. So it's all based on, yes, it is. It's all based on how the jury sees this. What's important, Richard, we spent an hour this morning. We didn't tell the federal agents. We were camped out trying to, notice you're not seeing Dr. Melgen. We were camped out, staked out, waiting for him this morning in the back. And the federal agents, they keep everything on lockdown. They're keeping him under such wraps, they drive him into the courthouse underneath so we couldn't get near him. Notice we can get to the senator, but we can't get to Dr. Meldrum, who's already been convicted. This comes down to the heart of the Medicare stuff. And in light of the McDonald's case, how do you define official act? If prosecutors, if prosecutors can show that the senator got involved over that $8.9 million deal with Medicare, he may be in trouble.
But again, as I've learned, it doesn't matter what it smells like or looks like as it relates to corruption. And you've made this point, Richard, you have to show empirically that he did those actions because it was payback for a political favor, and he was either not equipped to receive the government contract, he was steering to somebody who was undeserving or whatever else. And the standard, especially since the McDonald case, has gotten really hard to prove.
Not if there's evidence that somebody took money and then took an official act. Not complicated stuff.
A little more complicated, I will disagree about the Silver case till the cows come home, you and me, but the point in this one is, Menendez couldn't act unilaterally to make anything just go away. He had to go through other government entities. So for me, for someone to agree to the senator's ask, there had to be multiple parties involved, including people that weren't getting paid or compensated.
My point.
Right.
The question is whether calling up the immigration or an ambassador saying, can you relook at this visa, constitutes an official act, it's justifiably a problem. Look, 4 Albany legislative leaders, Miller, Silver, Bruno, and Ornstein, have been indicted, convicted, and then bam, their convictions are overturned. There's a record of prosecutorial overreach. I don't say that's what's happening here, but it's the Supreme Court is not going to let it happen.
You think he's in deep trouble?
I'm really concerned about, again, I haven't heard all the evidence, and at the end of the day, the jury will get instructions about the law, and they will match the facts with the law.
And the instructions in this case will be very important what the judge tells.
Absolutely. But both attorneys, prosecution and defense, will have an opportunity to look at the instructions and agree on them. But it does concern me when you're interfering with Medicaid, and also the business deal with the
government contract,
the contracts with the airport. You know, that's not standard stuff typically in the office.
Well, since we're talking about politicians in either trouble or that got into trouble in the past tense here, or I can say ongoing, let's talk about the saga of Anthony Weiner, the former Democratic congressman, and his wife, Abedin. They want their divorce records to be kept under wraps. Here's the Daily News take on it, always subtle here. Well, the attorneys for Weiner also asking the court for probation instead of prison time for his sexting scandal. As you may remember, Weiner admitted to corresponding inappropriately with a 15-year-old girl. His soon-to-be ex-wife, Abedin, pleaded with the court to keep him out of prison, citing the welfare of their 5-year-old child. Weiner, for himself, apologized once again to saying he ruined her aspirations. His words, of course, she was a top aide to Hillary Clinton. We know his fate will be decided at sentencing on September 25th. Prosecutors previously said a sentence of about 2 years would be appropriate. I don't know. I feel no sympathy for this guy. The amount of repeated opportunities that he was given to turn his life, and he found a forgiving electorate even when in the beginning stages of his run for mayor. It was as self-destructive behavior as I've ever seen. However, I just don't know what he did. Does it belong behind bars? Did he really jeopardize the welfare of anyone but himself?
Don't hesitate on this one. What he did was really bad.
Oh, beyond
Okay?
skeefy, yeah.
And not just skeefy.
Yeah.
It was bad, and it was criminal. The question of whether you belong in jail is a much more complicated question, but it doesn't do anybody any good to pretend that he was just being a crazy, wild and crazy guy. He did wrong, and he's got to pay for that.
So what does
Whether you
Carlos Danger believes? Don't give me the what ifs. Do you believe he should see the inside of a jail cell?
You know, I've been on this show on all these cases being for forgiveness. If someone did wrong, seeks forgiveness, they should be given forgiveness. Now, there's a limit, and he shouldn't be allowed to go scot-free, but 2 years on probation sounds to me about right.
How about you, Dom?
It's tough. Just like for you, Richard, Mr. Weiner really screwed up, okay?
And hurt a lot of people in the process. Those closest to him.
And I know this is going to perhaps anger some viewers, but he's not a bad guy. And I'm talking about personally, having known him for 25 years. He's not a bad guy, but and he needs help. Because he had a second chance that Mr. Brodsky already referred to. This man was on his way to winning a Democratic nomination after the first time to being the mayor of New York. Then he did the interview with this show and admitted that he had did it again. So clearly, if the voters gave you a second chance and you were possibly about to be mayor and your wife was the right-hand person for Hillary Clinton, all you had to do was lay low and stop doing this until the elections were over.
That's crazy.
No, I'm not going to say he's crazy. I'm going to say that he's an American and needs help, and we all need help sometimes. And I really do wish him the best. I really do.
So you don't think he should see time?
I don't see. Listen, I know a lot of people that have gone to jail, police officers as well, for sending emails to underage girls. So prosecutors are not playing with this issue. And maybe I'm a little biased, I just don't see how society gains by putting him in jail.
Is it a double standard, though, if he doesn't see jail?
Yes.
When others, soliciting a minor here or participating in this cross-state, all the things that we know the law historically does not look forgiving on, especially when you're dealing with a minor. What's your sense? You're an attorney. You're involved. You're also a defense attorney.
Yep.
What do you think?
I've been involved in the federal cases before, and the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a probation report, and the probation report is going to find out about his family history, talk about alcohol, drug abuse, whether there were any psychological issues there, and the probation is going to recommend whether it should be a year confinement. They recommend a sentence. A judge has the ability, if it's not mandatory minimums, to decide whether he goes to jail. My client, for example, got home confinement for $1 million in fraud. He was no criminal record, 24. So the defense attorneys will have an opportunity to present the best case forward. And they may just say, he needs help.
I got 10 seconds. Do you think he sees, you think he goes
I don't
away at
think
all?
so.
You don't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Probation with counseling or something.
Well, another guy who maybe didn't do anything criminal, but certainly was moronic, Steve Mnuchin. Used to live in large here when he was on Wall Street. Certainly he's got enough of his own money. But now that he's Treasury Secretary, sounds like he's looking for somebody else's dime here, including the taxpayers, it seems, to keep that lifestyle of the rich and famous going.